Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to explore something pretty fascinating. Have you ever heard of the Ethiopian Bible?
I'm excited to delve into this one.
Yeah, me too. We've talked about different Bibles before, but this one's really different.
It really challenges some common assumptions about the history of Christianity.
Yeah, exactly. Like where it started and how it spread.
For instance, some sources suggest that Christianity may have been present in Ethiopia as far back as 3,500 years ago.
Wow. That's way before it spread to lots of other parts of the world.
And the thing is, it wasn't brought to Ethiopia by outsiders.
Oh, really? So it was already there?
Yeah, it looks like it was already flourishing independently.
That's interesting. And what about this Queen of Sheba connection? I've heard a little about that.
Right, so she appears in both the traditional Bible and the Ethiopian Bible, but the Ethiopian version adds a whole other layer to the story.
What do you mean?
Well, it includes the tale of her son, Menelik I, who, according to Ethiopian tradition, was the son of King Solomon. Yeah, and he became the first emperor of Ethiopia.
It's amazing because there's actually genetic studies from 2012 that show evidence of cultural mixing between Ethiopia and the Middle East around that same time period.
It's really fascinating. You have this story that's often seen as just a legend, but then you have some scientific evidence that could support it.
Yeah, that really blurs the lines between history and myth.
It does.
So this Ethiopian Bible, it's not just some small variation. It has 88 books.
That's right. Quite a bit more than the 66 found in the King James Version.
What are those extra texts all about?
Many of them are what scholars call pseudepigrapha.
Pseudepigrapha.
Yeah. These are writings that are attributed to biblical figures, but not considered part of the accepted canon by other Christian denominations.
Interesting. So they were kind of left out of the other Bibles.
You could say that they offer a glimpse into a broader range of beliefs and interpretations from early Christianity.
So how did the Ethiopian Bible end up so different? I mean, were there always different versions of the Bible floating around?
That's a great question. The Bible we're familiar with today wasn't always a single unified book. You see, it evolved over centuries through translations, interpretations, and even, politics.
Oh, wow. So was it always, debated?
Well, imagine the early days of Christianity. Lots of different texts and stories and interpretations were circulating. Some were probably historically accurate, some maybe embellished, and some perhaps completely made up.
So how did they decide what to keep?
As the early church started to gain more authority, they wanted to have one unified version of the scriptures. They had to make choices about which texts best fit the narrative they were trying to promote.
So it wasn't just about spiritual truth. There were other things going on.
Exactly. Like any institution, the early church had its own interests and agendas, and the Ethiopian Bible, with its extra texts and different interpretations, might have presented a perspective that they didn't want to emphasize.
That's really fascinating. So are we saying that the Ethiopian Bible was kind of suppressed?
Well, it certainly faced challenges in terms of wider acceptance.
Why is that?
Let's explore that further. Well, for one thing, the language was a big barrier.
Oh, yeah, it was written in Ge'ez, right?
Yeah, an ancient Ethiopian language. Most people outside of Ethiopia couldn't even read it.
That makes sense. But besides the language, were there other reasons why it wasn't as widely known?
Well, Ethiopian Christianity developed a bit differently from European traditions.
Oh, in what way?
They had their own unique practices and interpretations.
So maybe that made other Christian communities less likely to accept it.
Possibly.
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier that the Ethiopian Bible actually has its own internal division.
Yeah, a broader and a narrower canon, right?
Exactly. It's a reflection of how things evolved and were debated within Ethiopian Christianity itself.
So what's the difference between those two canons?
Well, the broader one includes more of those pseudepigraphal texts that we talked about before.
Oh, the ones that weren't considered part of the accepted canon by other denominations.
Right. While the narrower canon is a more streamlined version.
So who decided which canon was official within the Ethiopian church?
Emperor Haile Selassie actually played a significant role in that.
Really?
Yeah, he helped to establish the narrow canon as the one that's officially recognized.
It's amazing how history, culture, and power all kind of intertwine to shape these religious texts and traditions. But despite all of that, it seems like the Ethiopian Bible is having a bit of a comeback lately.
That's right. There's definitely a growing interest in it.
What do you think is driving that?
I think people are really fascinated by uncovering these hidden histories, those stories that haven't been in the mainstream.
Yeah, and it challenges those established narratives that we've always been told.
Exactly. And for scholars, the Ethiopian Bible provides this really valuable window into the diversity of early Christian thought.
So it helps us see that there wasn't just one single unified way of thinking back then.
Yeah, it shows us that the early church wasn't this monolithic thing. It was a dynamic and evolving community with lots of different perspectives.
So studying the Ethiopian Bible can give us a more complete picture of what early Christianity was actually like.
Absolutely.
And for people within the Ethiopian church, what does this renewed interest mean for them?
I think it's a chance for them to really share their unique heritage and traditions with a wider audience.
Yeah, like reclaiming their own narrative.
Exactly. And they've been working on translating the Ethiopian Bible into more accessible languages.
Wow, that's great. So even those of us who aren't religious, why should we care about the Ethiopian Bible? What can we learn from it?
It gives us a fascinating look at how history, culture, and power all play a role in shaping our understanding of sacred texts.
That's interesting.
It shows that religious traditions aren't static. They're constantly changing and evolving.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that.
And the Ethiopian Bible really prompts us to think about how history is written and who gets to decide what is considered truth.
It really makes you realize that there's often more than one side to the story, especially when it comes to history and religion.
That's so true. And the Ethiopian Bible is a perfect example of that. It really pushes us to think critically about how those stories are put together, whose voices are heard, whose are left out, and how all those choices end up shaping what we believe to be true.
It's amazing how something like this can challenge those long-held assumptions about, well, like you were saying, what is considered truth.
It's a good reminder that history is often told from the perspective of those in power.
And there are always other perspectives out there just waiting to be discovered. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Ethiopian Bible, what would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to take away from all of this? What's that one big idea that you hope they remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is simply to stay curious, to keep asking questions, keep exploring, keep seeking out different viewpoints. The Ethiopian Bible shows us that there's always more to learn, more stories to uncover, and more layers of history to peel back. It's really quite inspiring.
It is. For me, the most amazing thing is that even something as familiar as the Bible has these hidden depths and alternative interpretations that most of us never know about. It's like a call to approach everything we think we know with a sense of wonder and curiosity, because there's always more to discover. And that's what I love about doing these deep dives with you. It's all about that journey of discovery together.
I agree. And who knows what other hidden histories are out there just waiting to be found.
Exactly. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing those diverse perspectives. You never know what you might find.